Aloha, I'm Kala'i Miller, and welcome to Home is Here. We're here at world-famous Ali'i Beach Park in Haleiwa on Oahu's North Shore. And every year, off this very beach, the best surfers in the world compete in the first leg of the Vans Triple Crown of Surfing. The Triple Crown was started by two local surfers, Fred Hemmings and longtime event director Randy Rarick. Randy found surfing at a young age and has been involved with the sport ever since. From fixing dings and shaping boards to competing professionally and putting on surf events, Randy's life has centered around surfing for the last 6 decades. Since he's retired as the director of the Triple Crown, he's kept his passion alive, restoring historic and vintage surfboards.
I'm Randy Rarick from the North Shore of Oahu, Hawaii. I grew up here in Hawaii, and surfing has been my life since I was a 10-year-old kid. I had my first surf at 10 years old when Rabbit Kekai, the famous Hawaiian beach boy, pushed me into my first wave, and it was right in front of the old Royal Hawaiian. And I remember riding that wave for about 20, 30 yards, and the wave faded out. It was probably a little 1-foot wave, and I looked back and I went, wow, that's amazing. I propelled myself through the water with no propeller, no motor, no nothing. It was just the pure aspect of nature, and I was just enthralled, and I said, I really want to be a surfer. Back in the 60s, which was known as the golden age of surf, they came out with foam, which made the boards much lighter and much easier to ride, and so it exploded the interest in surfing. Being a young haole kid growing up in the islands, everybody took up surfing. It was really amazing because back then they had what they called surf bums. It was kind of a spin-off of the word ski bum. And I always thought, you know, it was unfair to call us bums just because we wanted to go surfing. And the idea was, you know, we wanted to spend as much time as possible in the water, and Hawaii was the perfect place to do it. Funny little story, I was a Boy Scout and was Troop 10 in Kaimuki, and I had perfect attendance. And one week this movie came to town. Back in the 60s, the way you got your kind of fix on surfing was when a surf movie came to town. And they came about every few months. And this one came, and I saw the posters go up on all the telephone poles, and it said one night only. And it was at the Princess Kaiulani down in Waikiki. They were showing the film. It was on a Friday night. And I had to make a decision. Do I go see this surf movie, or do I keep my perfect attendance at Boy Scouts? And I hemmed and hawed all week long, and finally Friday came around and I said, you know what, I'm going to the surf movie. And that's when I said, I'm going to be a surfer for the rest of my life. Before I became a full-time surfer, I remember going into a surf shop where it's actually a factory in Kaka'ako. It was the old Velzy surfboard factory where they made the boards for the rental fleets in Waikiki. And I walked in the shop, and here's all these racks with all these surfboards, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all this. And the smell of the resin was just intoxicating, and I smelled that, and I watched the guys making these boards, and I said to myself, I want to make surfboards. So at 11 years old, I decided I was going to start making surfboards. And shortly thereafter, I began to fix dings on boards, and in and around their neighborhood. By the time I was 12 years old, we moved out to Niu Valley on the southeast shore. And I said to all the guys in the neighborhood, I said, I'll fix your dings for free. You just pay for the materials. So I started fixing boards for everybody, and I got so good at it that I actually got hired at 14 years old to work at Hobie Surfboards and Surfline Hawaii in Honolulu. And basically that launched my career in manufacturing and pretty much every aspect of making surfboards. This break out in front of my house was called Toes Reef, and every day after school, rain or shine, wind or no wind, no waves or whatever, we would paddle out to Toes Reef and surf it. So I was dedicated to being a surfer. Then on the weekends, I would work at the surf shop repairing boards. And By surfing a lot, we got into competition, and I got to be a decent surfer. I probably culminated my teenage years by winning the Hawaii State Surfing Championships in 1967. So that was a real honor to be the Hawaii State champion in the junior division. At the same time, I was making boards. I apprenticed under George Downing, under Dick Brewer, and learned how to shape surfboards. And I began transitioning from repairing boards to shaping boards. And at the same time, I was competing. So I was surfing in the local amateur tournaments. And towards the late 60s, there began to be a little bit of sprinkling of actually prize money in these events. And at that stage, I was in my late teens, and we all said, God, wouldn't it be really neat if you got paid to be a surfer? And that was just the very beginning of pro surfing. And really, there was no such thing as a professional surfer yet. But they started giving a little bit of prize money away, and it was like, wow, imagine if you just went surfing and you got paid, and that's all you had to do was go surfing. I saw that pro surfing was going to be happening, and I realized that was the future of where surfing was going. Problem was, I was a little bit too late in the game to become really a good pro surfer, because back in those days, by the time you hit 20 years old, you were over the hill. And I was by that stage in my early 20s, and I realized if I wanted to keep making boards, that would have been good. But if I wanted to be involved in professional surfing, I had to do something. So I teamed up in the mid-70s with Fred Hemmings, and we started what was called International Professional Surfing, which was the forerunner of what is now called the World Surf League. And we started the Pro Tour in 1976, and it legitimized professional surfing. Prior to that, surfing was just basically considered a lifestyle sport. And it wasn't really considered a professional or a competitive sport per se. But by organizing a world tour, linking all these events around the world together and creating this world circuit, we created the credibility that professional surfing was there to stay. And back then there was hardly any prize money, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I was a tour director from 1976 through 1982. And after 6 years of going around the world, which everybody thought it was just a romantic dream job, it was a lot of work, a lot of pain in the butt, and there was no money back in those early days. We were by hook and crook pulling the tour together. And I would actually shape surfboards at each stop along the way to make enough money to get to the next stop. So I had to supplement my income by shaping surfboards still. Well, the tour kept growing year by year by year. And in 1983, there was kind of a coup where the IPS that Fred Hemmings and myself had started was overthrown by a group called the Association of Surfing Professionals, or the ASP, and that was led by an Australian contingent of mainly Ian Cairns and Peter Townend. So in 1983, the ASP superseded the IPS. I resigned my position as a tour director, and I decided to dedicate my energy here to Hawaii. They moved the tour finish from Hawaii to Australia. So Fred Hemmings and myself decided, well, we need to have something here in Hawaii. So we grouped the three main events. There was the Hawaiian Pro, the World Cup of Surfing, and the Pipeline Masters. Those three events, we linked the three together, and we created what was known as the Triple Crown of Surfing. At the time, we didn't realize it was going to grow into probably the most important title next to the world title. We just wanted something to help promote Hawaii because the World Tour was no longer being decided here. And that was back in 1983. Here we are 40 years later, and the Triple Crown is still considered the series of events, almost more important than the world title, especially to the Hawaiians. And I dedicated my life as the director of the Triple Crown events to really building the importance, the credibility, and really projecting what Hawaii had to offer in the world of surfing. Growing up here in Hawaii, your heart's in Hawaii, and I always have wanted to promote Hawaii. I mentioned earlier about I hated it when they called us surf bums. Well, I hated it when they put Hawaii down, and Hawaii has the best surf in the world, and I've traveled through 170 different countries, and I've surfed in 70 of them, and I surfed the best waves around the world, and I guarantee you Hawaii's got the best surf in the world. So we should have the best surfing competitions in the world. Surfing is Hawaii's gift to the world of sport. I mean, there's no question about it. It originated here, it spread the worldwide, and now they say there's something like 32 million surfers in the world. So it's crazy how this little sport that started in Hawaii is blossomed around the world. Really, my heart was always to promote Hawaii as the birthplace of surfing, the place where surfing deserves to be recognized the most. And, you know, I spent my entire professional career doing just that. And I think it's great that the Australians had super good waves, the South Africans have great waves. Europe's amazing how many good waves they found in Europe, South America, of course. But everybody wants to come to Hawaii. Hawaii is Mecca. You know, if you're a surfer and you want to be considered complete, you have to come to Hawaii. And if you're a competitive surfer, you have to come and win in Hawaii.
I'm really proud to present to the 2013 Vans Triple Crown of Surfing champion, John Florence.
When I was 16 years old, it was in Waikiki for the opening ceremony of the Duke Kahanamoku Invitational. This was 1966, 67, and Duke was there. And here I was a helper for Fred Van Dyke, who was running the tournament. And the Duke saw me, and he was kind of standing alone with all these other people, these luminaries and famous surfers and everything. And he looked at me, he said, "Hey boy, come sit down next to me." And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, here's Duke Kahanamoku. So I sat down next to the Duke, and we had about 10, 15 minutes, which was a long time for an evening going on, and nobody bothered us. And he sat and he asked me, he says, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm helping, you know, to put this event together, and I'm really, you know, like starry-eyed looking at the Duke." And he says, "Son, I want to tell you something, you know, whatever you put back, you will get 10 times over." So he says, "Do as much as you can for surfing, and you will enjoy the fruits of your efforts." And that stuck in my brain, and I took that as sort of my mantra, that I am going to be whatever I can do for surfing, and particularly Hawaii, to promote in the best way I possibly can, whether it's shaping a surfboard, running a surf contest, putting on a surf movie, conducting anything. The more you can put a good positive effort forward, you will get that in return 10 times over. And that's been my philosophy for the last 60 years, and it's allowed me to really travel the world and use surfing as a metaphor for life. Almost 40 years of running tournaments here in Hawaii. You get to a point where you eventually have to stop doing what you're doing, and the mid-2010s, I decided it was time for me to retire. The staff that I'd built working the Triple Crown, I kind of handed the keys off to them, and I said, "Take the ball here and run with it." And yeah, they've done a really good job of continuing keeping the events. And so now I've come full circle after 65 years of being involved in the surfing industry. I'm back to what I started off as when I was a teenager. I'm now back to what I call glorified ding repair. And what this is taking old surfboards, strip them down, and basically rebuild them the way we did back in the 60s. So the art of surfboard restoration is just that, it's an art, because basically what you're doing, similar to a car restoration, you take an old blank that is now brown and dinged and beat up and seen the ravages of time and being ridden so much, and we actually have a technique where we sand it and we peel the fiberglass off, so you're exposing back to the raw foam now. Now that foam is usually browned out from the sunshine because they didn't have ultraviolet inhibitors back in those days. And there's dings on it from being run into by other surfers or hitting the reef or what have you. The fin on it is usually broken off. You try to keep the integrity of the shape, bring it back to clean white foam, and then you fix all the dings where you put a patch in it or you repair it or plug a hole or whatever it may take to what damages. Then we fiberglass it again like we did in the 60s. Back then, we used 2 layers of 10-ounce fiberglass, and then you put some color work on it. We use what we call gel coat pigment, where you mix different colors, and you put stripes or bands or different kind of badging on it. And you try to make it look as original as you possibly can to what the board looked like when it came out of the factory new. I've been a lifelong surfer since I was 10 years old, so we're talking 65 years ago now. And what we call stoke, it's really hard to explain to someone who has never surfed what it is to experience surfing. It's just the thrill, the excitement, and the fact that it's different every time keeps it just that, thrilling and exciting. That first wave when I was 10 years old and I rode that 20, 30 yard wave and looked back and went, wow, it was amazing to be able to move through the ocean on this moving wave and capture that spirit. I'm still happy to just be able to paddle out and experience that essence of what Mother Nature can give to you. And as I said, it's super hard to put into words, super hard to describe. It's really an indescribable experience that you get when you ride a wave.